We're going to be looking in just a few minutes in Proverbs chapter 3. But as you know, this is Father's Day. And Father's Day to me is kind of a big deal because we need good fathers. Not only do we need good fathers, we need some old school good fathers. I was raised old school, and I see nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Had I not been raised old school, y'all would be visiting me through your prison ministry, no doubt. You look on the news today and you see all these school shootings where some young punk walks up in a school and starts shooting, and of course the only thing the stupid, mindless media and government can holler, well, we gotta take their guns. Like that's gonna do it. Hey, we outlawed drugs, didn't we? That worked out real well, didn't it? No, we need daddies. We need fathers to raise their children how to behave. We all had more than what these kids do now in the way of weaponry, and we never bothered to take it into school. We'd show it to each other in the parking lot. Mine taught me early about the dangers and safety and all of that stuff. There was never a problem, but now we have absentee fathers, and that's why we have school shootings. It's a fact. Now we got this. I think the superintendent of the Richmond City Schools says next year we're going to have gender-neutral graduation gowns. Fairfax Public Schools are now going to teach 8th graders about sexual perversion and about how wonderful it is. And then they tell us now that there's more than 2 genders. There's over 50 different genders, and it grows every day. And we have these little twinkie boys walking around saying, I think I'm a girl today. I can see what my daddy would do if I told him that one time. You know what it is? Boys aren't taught how to be men anymore. They're taught how to be little Twinkies. It's a fact. Hey, I'm going to be rude and crude today, but I got the microphone for right now. And you ain't going to get this nowhere else. I'm going to promise you what I'm getting ready to tell you. But you need to hear it. If anybody watching by TV don't like it, hang on. You're going to dislike it even more in about a minute. Girls are not even taught to be girls either. It's because they've got sorry dads doing something else but being a parent. And now they look to MTV and the movies and Hollywood and all that on how to be what they're supposed to be. And I guarantee you, I've watched all of it and they don't even know what to tell you. Everybody's confused as to what they are. My father had a simple rule for me and my sister. He looked at me and said, you act like a man. He looked at my sister and you act like a woman, and that was the end of it. No doubt Hollywood is so mixed up today when it's full of pedophiles. It is. Let's face it, folks. They're finding out a little bit more every day. They're the most wicked, evil people in the world. Studies have shown that the lack of a strong, manly father, and a godly one, I might add, causes a lot of children to grow up in perversion. You could do a study on that and find out that's what happened. Studies have shown that girls that do not have a strong, loving father in the home grow up to throw themselves at anything that comes along. That's really politically incorrect, but it's the truth and you know it. It is up to the fathers to tell those girls that they are worth something. Make your daughters feel like they are a princess, because that's what they are. And you go after anybody that don't treat them that way. Everybody knew not to ever put a hand on one of my daughters. They did. They knew what was coming. I showed them some of my hardware. And I told them they could select which one I was going to blow them away with if they ever touched one of my daughters. It's your choice. I'm serious as I can be. I would in a heartbeat. Even today, don't ever put your hands on one of my daughters or my wife, or that'll be the last thing you see. Lack of discipline in the home. Lack of a godly example from dad is what wreaks havoc on a family. Anybody that does any counseling and anybody that's a pastor can see the church is full of people that were raised by a sorry father, and they see the damage and the scars that's done. My daddy taught me a number of things. The first thing he taught me, believe it or not, was how to shoot, because I can't remember much past back before 4 years old, and he taught me how to shoot ever since I was 4 years old. He did. I know that's child abuse now. I know that. But that's right. All your children ought to know how. I ain't going to get into that, but it's the truth. I remember I was 4 years old. He put that little .22 rifle up to my arm, and he said, now aim at that jar. And I said, squeeze the trigger. And when it exploded, I was hooked. I love it. He taught me how to hunt, and he taught me to be responsible. You don't shoot at anything that you're not going to eat. My father, believe it or not, as private as a man as he is, taught me how to pray. He would sit at night beside me before I'd go to sleep, and he taught me how to pray. My father took me to church, and he didn't drop me off. He came in with me. When I was living under his roof, and I was until the day I was married, there was a very thin wall between my bedroom and the kitchen. And him and Mom would be up in the morning on Sunday about 7 o'clock, getting breakfast ready, and the only thing I would hear was this, through the wall. It didn't matter if I came in at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I was going to church as long as I was under his roof. And there weren't no excuses. I tried that a couple of times, and that was not very wise. We went. And he left me a godly example in that area. My father also taught me how to treat a woman. My daddy always took care of Mama. He always loved her. And he was always good to her. I never realized the depth of that because my father was not one to show a lot of emotion because he was a tough he-man until the day he broke down crying in front of me when he knew that my mother was going to die. He always loved her. He always treated her like a queen. She never had to worry about a thing. Daddy took care of it. And here's another one that'll wake everybody else up. He taught me all about sex. Hey, where else you going to get that? You think the school's going to tell you? Huh? You want to hear what they have to say? I remember I was in the garden one day. I was a kid, and I asked Daddy about it. He said, "Oh, sit down, son. We got to talk." So we sat down under this big old stark apple tree, and he went into detail and explained everything to me. And as soon as he did, I went in the house and I told my mother that my dad taught me all about sex, and this is her exact words: "Now that you know how it's done, don't do it." That's true. They were the yin and yang. My daddy taught me personal responsibility. Now, I believe in explaining it the way it really is supposed to be, the way you men need to hear this, particularly you young men. When my daddy stopped me out in the driveway one day when I was a teenager, an older teenager. And I don't know what got into him, but he looked at me and he said, boy. When he referred to me as boy instead of David, you better stop and you better listen. And he said, boy, if you think you're man enough to get a girl pregnant, that's going to be your wife, and you will marry her and stay with her, and you will raise that child. Do you understand me? And I said, yes, sir. A lot of young men need to hear this, because we got a bunch of boys running around with about a dozen children by a dozen girls, and they're going to keep perpetuating that cycle until we've got a whole nation full of people that are messed up. It needs to be told. I know it's a little crude, but hey, that's what my daddy said, and that's what I'm telling y'all. Personal responsibility. He also taught me the importance of work. I have been working since, let's see, let me calculate how old. I have been working for 45 years. Had a job for 45 years except 2 weeks when I got laid off from a place and I thought the world was going to come to an end. Daddy explained to me that manual labor is not the president of Mexico. I saw my daddy get up when he was sick and go to work. I saw him shovel a foot of snow, and he had the flu. He put chains on his truck, and he went to work, and I said, Daddy, why are you doing that? He said, because it will not get done if I don't go in and do it. And that's the attitude he had, and that is what made America great. I always think of Brother Campbell right there. That's one of the hardest working men I've ever met in my life. I kid you not. He can outwork 3 young men in the ground, and you've never guessed how old he is, and I'm not going to tell it. That's old school. It's the motto back then was root little pig or die, because you couldn't go running to the government with your hands out. They didn't have anything. You had to go get it for yourself. You had to take personal responsibility, and you had to get out there and hustle. That made America great. My mother always said that Daddy's birthstone was the grindstone. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing. He is 87 years old, and his biggest complaint is, I can't work anymore. His knees gave out. He can't walk. And he said, I'd give anything if I could be working again. That was my uncle's last words to me before he died. He said, you don't know how lucky you are, son. I said, why? He said, because you can work. And he said, I love to work. You could call my uncle's office at 2 o'clock in the morning and he'd answer it. I don't think he ever slept. But that's a good thing, the work ethic. It's all old school, and it needs to go back to that, because this new school ain't doing so hot. We've got 40 million people on food stamps. In a nation like this, who taught them that? And I realize, thank God for those programs when they're needed. But they're not a way of life. We need to get out and get off the plantation, for crying out loud. Get off the plantation and go to work. There's jobs out there now, so there's no excuse. I'll get off of that soapbox too. Let's look at Proverbs chapter 3 and what the Lord had to say. This is the perfect father talking to you as his child. He said, my son, forget not my law, but let your heart keep my commandments. We need to obey the laws of our Father, and we need to obey the laws of God. This right here will keep you out of trouble. This will guide you. This will lead you. It'll teach you how to live, and it'll prepare you to die. And it says, for length of days and long life and peace shall they add to you. A friend of mine used to run a business, and he had a motto. It said, you will pay extra for being stupid. They said if anybody ever came into their business that they realized was stupid, they charged them extra. You know what? If you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough. That's off of a movie, but it's the truth. You will pay extra for being stupid. My dad used to tell me, son, don't do this and don't do that, and I'd go do it, and man, was it something to pay for. And I always got a good I told you so. He'd fix it for me, but he'd tell me I told you so. I respected my dad so much that one time he told me when I was a kid that if I did such and such, he would tear my behind up like a new ground. And I went, oh no, I'm not going to do that. I didn't know what a new ground was, but I knew it was bad. And so I waited till I was about 40 years old when I could still outrun him. And I asked him, Daddy, what's a new ground? He said, it's a freshly plowed field. I said, you mean you were going to do that to me if I did so? He said, absolutely. I was that fearful of it, of his law. Those were my dad's rules. That was his law. Let not mercy and truth forsake you. Bind them about your neck. Write them on the table of your heart. Two of the most important things is truth and mercy. God is a God of mercy. God is a God of truth. Bind them on your neck. Write them on the tables of your heart. Don't ever forget. And the Bible says, so you shall find favor and good understanding in the sight of God and man. Follow. This is not a book of do's and don'ts. This is a guideline of what you're supposed to do if you want to live your life right. God is not here to throw a blanket on your party. He's here to save your life. And add length of days to it. And so going out and being stupid has a price to pay with it. And these things are written so we won't do it. Here's a real important one. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. Your own understanding will get you in a pack of trouble. A lot of times, what you think maybe you ought to do is the dumbest thing you could possibly do. Do not trust in yourself. Do not trust in man. Trust in the Lord. Do it with all your heart and don't rely on your own understanding for things. Rely on His understanding. He will never lead you wrong. A perfect Father. I used to laugh at things that my dad and mom would say sometimes. Of course, I did it privately or with my sister. And I go, listen, do you hear what those dinosaurs are saying? They're just so old, fogey. And I said, I will never be like that. I will never be like that. Then one day I was lecturing one of my kids, and they looked at me and they said, oh my Lord, you sound just like Papa. And I rehearsed what came out of my mouth, and it was the old fogey stuff. Why? Because it worked. It was the right thing. In all your ways, acknowledge the Father, and He will direct your paths. There might be some of you that didn't have a father, but you got a heavenly Father who will help you and who will lead you and who will guide you. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. We have a nation of lunatics out there right now. Any of you that have watched the news, read social media, I have to put metal bands around my head when I go on Facebook now to keep my head from exploding. People have lost their minds. I have never seen such irrational, foolish notions that people have that defy all common sense. Oh my. And they're wise in their own eyes. It'll be health to your navel and marrow to your bones. Honor the Lord with your substance. Give God of what you have. God gave you that good job you got. You need to honor Him with it. God gave you that inheritance. He gave you those possessions. He gave you that money. He gave you that talent. Honor God with what you have. It says to honor the Lord with your substance and with the first fruits of all your increase. I don't preach on money very often. You know I don't. I really don't. And you can tell I don't have a lot of it, okay? But I'm serious. You give to God the first fruits of what He gives you, and you honor Him with it. And that's not Old Testament. Jesus says these things you ought to have done. And God will always bless you. You're not going to miss a thing if you honor God first with what you have. So shall your barns be filled with plenty, and the presses shall burst out with new wine. And here's one that none of us like to hear. My son, despise not the chastening or the correction of the Lord, neither be weary of His correction. If you want to stop being weary of God's correction, stop being stupid. Is that good advice? Oh my. You know, it's like this one guy was on the phone, he was a lawyer, and he'd been defending this guy that kept getting arrested and kept getting arrested. And he said, I got a good tip for you. Quit breaking the law. God corrects His own. If you have never had a whipping from God, you aren't His. I'm sorry. I'm not going to go up the street and whip the neighbor's children. I'm not going to look around in church here and go after somebody else's kids. Lord knows I wanted to at times. Oh, I better shut up or everybody's going to leave. But I'll correct my own. Because they belong to me. They are mine. They are my responsibility. If God doesn't correct you, you're not His responsibility. You're not His. You're just His creature. You're not His child. And so He corrects everybody that belongs to Him. And don't be weary of it. Do what He says to do and turn it around. For whom the Lord loves, He corrects, even as a father the son in whom He delighteth. Oh, I've never correct my child. Then you don't love your child. I'm sorry, you don't love your child. You've been deceived. You've been fooled by the devil. He wants you to raise a little monster. Keep that up. Don't correct your child and you will have that. In all of his demonic and insanity, Charles Manson was in an interview back in the 80s, and I was watching it with Geraldo Rivera. And you could look in his eyes and see demons in him. But for one moment, his mind cleared and his eyes cleared, and for about 10 seconds he had sanity. And he looked at Geraldo Rivera and he said, if you sing "Light My Fire" to your child all his life, when he grows up, he'll light your fire. I knew what he meant by that. And that was the only truth that ever came out of that evil man's mouth, but it was the truth. The way you raise your child is what you're going to wind up with when they get grown. Oh, they may still rebel, but they will come back. If you have raised them right, they'll come back to it. But don't be weary of the correction. Happy is the man that finds wisdom and the man that gets understanding. My wife always uses the expression, so-and-so gets it. I like that. Because there are a lot of people that don't get it. They don't get it. You can talk to them till you're blue in the face and it don't register. Their brain is set on something else, usually something stupid, and they don't get it. And the person that has wisdom, they will get it. They will learn from other people. Wisdom only can come from experience. Seeing how this worked and how that worked. And today we have people that keep trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. You're not going to get it. You're going to get the same results over every time you do that. Finding wisdom is so important. For the merchandise of it is better than the merchandise of silver, and the gain thereof than fine gold. Nothing is more valuable than wisdom. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things that you can desire, not to be compared unto her. Length of days is in her right hand, and in her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are the ways of pleasantness, and all of her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to them that lay hold upon her, and happy is everyone that retaineth her. Dads, teach your children wisdom. Share your wisdom with them. Oh, it may not seem to sink in. but it will. My dad and my mom as well shared what they could with me in the way of wisdom. And it took a while before it made sense to me. I thought, just like everybody else, that, I don't know, let me see if I can word this correctly. Once you hit about 17 or 18, a disease comes into your house and makes your parents retarded. They suddenly don't know anything. They don't have a clue about life. They don't get it. And everything that comes out of their mouth is just utter stupidity. And it actually stays that way usually until you get in your late 20s or maybe 30, and then suddenly they get well. And then they start making sense again. You know what I'm trying to say? And that, you know what that actually means? You got some wisdom. Finally, what they said sunk into that thick head of yours and started making sense. So listen to your fathers. And fathers, let me tell you something. You may not have any idea what a heavy responsibility you have being a dad. But like Mike said, you are the high priest of your home. And you need to be the one to lead, and you need to be the one to set the example, and you need to be the one to live godly. Mom has a huge responsibility, and we do that on Mother's Day. But dads, I'm telling you, we have so many problems today with children because their dads don't raise them right. It's a very heavy responsibility. The night that the first night that my first child was born was the very last night that I slept all night long. I haven't had a good night's sleep in 30-some years. That's why I look so old right now, I suppose. And it doesn't matter. They're all on their own, and you still will worry about them. You still will be concerned about them. So rest up real good before you have a child, because that's the end of it. We'll get all that rest when we get to heaven. But I'm telling you, it's the truth. It's a big deal. Fathers are a big deal. And today, the feminist movement in Hollywood and all that want to do away with men, particularly Christian men, because Christian men are a threat to this new world order. Christian men are a threat to pedophilia. Christian men are a threat to anything that is godly and decent, and they hate you for it. So if you want to make them hate you a little bit more, be a good dad. Be a good dad. God will look at you and tell you, well done. I don't want anything else said over me if I leave this world before the Lord comes to get us more than he was a good